Thanks everybody for coming online. I think these days is a bit different now. So I think really to start off, I think we recognize I think everybody's time is pretty precious. We only actually have around 30 minutes here. So when we first talked about this topic, I think Chris and us, we realized that there's actually a lot of information. So what we're going to just share as much as we can in these 20 minutes, but we do actually have compiled a fair bit of information. So if you are really interested in more information, and the slides itself is actually have up to around 50 slides. So, but we're only going to share the key points and really open up more to in terms of Q&A in this whole session. Okay, to start off, I think this is really what the agenda is. Just a real brief introduction about AiSP, and I mean, this is a whole collaboration where you see professionals coming out as part of AiSP, and we're also looking into how we can actually better enable and make the cyberspace safer by working with associations like SCCCI in terms of reaching out. And one of the key things we do a lot is really focus on SME. And then of course, the rest of the agenda as we go down really covers the key threats in terms of changing your mindset, in terms of how you educate your people, and again, most importantly, just a bit highlights on the good practices as well. Okay, so AiSP, fundamentally, we have been in operation since 2008. And we focus on a few things, really to try and better the knowledge, not only for the professionals, but also to do outreach in terms of connecting to the, out to the community as well. And also to recognize how professionals itself get certified. And as well as, I think to be frank, for people who are looking at security services in the long run, how do you actually quantify people you work with actually that whole established and actually credible as well. So one of the key reasons we do actually run this cybersecurity awareness advisory program, and part of it actually is the collaboration with SCCCI as part of this knowledge outreach. So such sessions are actually where we reach out and actually share from a professional perspective what we see out in the environment. Okay, without further ado, really good kicking into myself. So just a quick introduction. A few things. I'm actually been in the industry for 20 over years. I'm actually in Trustwave. I'm leading a team looking into emerging technologies. So things like cloud, IoT, I think all relevant topics, even to be frank, in this current digital world as well. Of course, one key thing, which is not a very good thing during this period, food makes me happy. So stay at home, you get more accessible to food. Challenges do. Same thing, I look at, I think every day is where challenge actually keeps you going as well. So really, even things as exercise, marathons, these are things really that is very important. And voluntary. So here I am actually, this is also where I do actually want to sound out to people who are really interested in participating more as well in this community. You know, cybersecurity is for everybody as well. So if long run, in terms of interest, you can reach out to Chris, and I think we have upcoming events as well, which you can actually participate as well. Okay, really looking at what is the new norm. So today, it is a changed world, if you can call it. But in a lot of cases, today, as we talk about it, you do actually, it's mandatory to work from home. Even as individuals, you do know that it's actually getting down to the fines that is actually enforcing all this. So this whole perspective basically means that few things. Telecommuting becomes a norm. Probably in Singapore, that's a bit of a tough, because we are such a small country, and coming face to face is actually something of daily basis. In the larger countries, even in the US, I think a lot of my colleagues, they do a lot from work from home, and that's probably not a difficult issue. Then our interactions now becomes pure digital a lot. Looking at video conferencing, video phone calls, and of course, the biggest lot of what is actually emails. If you realize today, you will find that emails become probably increasing, and it's probably not the most effective, but it is actually probably also the key focus of when we come to cybersecurity itself as well. Now, of course, the core constraint, as you look at it, is how do you better work or be actually productive if you talk about working from home, because we start to look at how you can get access to information, even equipment that traditionally you are accustomed to in the office as well. Okay. So taking a look at that, what are the key things that you really need to think about? So when we talk about telecommunicating, that's really on three things. Reviewing what you traditionally would have probably taken for granted. What is the access that you allow? The way you authenticate someone, and most importantly, authorization. What this means, actually, you probably have to review how your organization, your roles, as well as in terms of your mechanisms of actually authenticating people. Because today, by working from home, one key thing you realize is that what you have in the past in terms of physical constraint, examples, access to the office, and so on, no longer exists. You do not have that tangible control that you can stop someone from going into an office, but you actually need to do that virtually as well. And most importantly, how do you actually maintain that productivity? How this effectively, if we talk about it, really is actually quite a culture change. This really involves highlighting how to better work, how to even segregating, you want to say, the physical part of your home for work, because that is only where you can actually get the same productivity potentially from what you get out of office as well. And the most important thing is things that sometimes become optional or on the side actually now becomes key concerns that you actually will actually have. So internet connectivity. Today, if you recognize a lot of us, I think even from a last recent outage, feel the impact, because it impacts us not only from our work, but even for our kids in terms of learning. You need to start looking at the cost of your investment as well. So in the past, probably you talk about things in terms of various licenses for VPNs, various other services, example, even to the cloud. All these are becoming now your main cost consideration, and also whether your business actually allows you to actually move into them to actually be able to effectively enable yourself moving ahead in terms of your business. And of course, other key things when we talk about that is really changing the collaboration among teams. So today you no longer can talk over the table to someone. You actually need to effectively be able to make that effort to do collaboration. Having meetings, to be frank, if we talk about video calls, that actually still adds back that aspect of collaboration, be able to see the other people. How do you actually effectively still be able to do the work that needs to be on site? And of course, most importantly, which is the key challenge, I think, when we talk about the current state, is no longer do you actually have, I will say, a defined line between what is home and what is office. So basically, work sometimes get extended indefinitely when people actually start to schedule meetings, because there's no traveling time. You basically need to look at all this in terms of that. Yeah. So taking one step back, while we can say that the world has changed, but a lot of things never change. A lot of times the whole decision making comes around to you actually reviewing everything. So while we try to handle this whole new situation, we do need to reevaluate when we talk about moving things to better enable our workforce or even our ability to work from home. Firstly, I think if you talk about it, the risk and threats balance always occurs. When we talk about risks, are things that internally we can control. I'll go further in depth with that. But fundamentally, when you come from the threats, that's really what is happening out in the world. I mean, the most common things today, if you hear, is with any event, something like COVID, there will always be people taking advantage of it. Scams, you want to say basically phishing, all this comes in the name of COVID-19 as well. Okay. And most importantly now, if you realize is that in order for you to work effectively, things need to be digitized. And that means your assets not necessarily physical anymore. You need to actually have them stored somewhere in the digital way, be it in the cloud, be it on hard disks, be it on your laptops. And this becomes the key value that you actually need in terms of work, and which is really where the hackers are actually targeting. So if you look at one most classic case, I think the malware world actually has already started taking advantage of this. And one of the key things, if you recognize it, does this means that you'll make digital world actually become harder? On the opposite, I would say that it actually drives the need to be both converting our current business to be digital, but at the same time, having that awareness and mind share to actually better secure it as well. So how do we actually really look into that? So first thing, I think when we talk about telecommuting, access, authorization, and authentication. So as you talk about access, I think some key questions you need to ask yourself, right? I think in the past, do you actually go down to things like giving people all access, or actually do you go down to roles? I think in today's world, if you talk about example platforms like O365, and if you use things like Active Directory, you could actually define all organizations. And of course, you could actually have a bit of a process in place where only if you include people in certain groups do you allow them access. And of course, one of the key things also is in terms of authentication. And I think one thing, if you hear a lot about the common issues, I think on a particular platform, I'll call it, it's Zoom. One of the key things that if people does to delve into it, it is sometimes where people tend to neglect that, a virtual meeting holds the same considerations you need to have for a physical meeting. You need to be able to identify who had come in. Sometimes those are things that we forgot to do or probably neglect, partly because it is not something so tangible as in the physical world. Now, of course, in terms of authorization, today I think if you talk about that, in fact, this question, if you want to say, is a definite no, that you should not be giving access to all your stuff. I think just because they can't have IT support. I think this is where you need to start look at how you can better enable IT support, even without addressing. In fact, one of the key things you need to be very concerned about at this point is data loss. You want to say, why is that? So not so much of malicious intent or stuff, sometimes it's more potential negligence as well. Okay. And of course, how do you actually start to have key things to actually look at how the different interaction mechanisms, be it by video conferencing, calls, or even emails, needs to be better administered. So process-wise, policy-wise, do you actually start to look at your data confidentiality and whether you want to have a tighter control on what devices could actually access that? And of course, on the people perspective, in fact, one of the key things I do want to highlight is people actually is a main essence in a lot of cases where how do you actually have that awareness, not only from the IT folks monitoring activities, but from individuals today. I think some of the things, tips I'll probably just share later in the slides as well. Now, of course, are things properly configured? So one of the things, if we talk about some key best practices, like what we said, having virtual meetings the same controls as your physical meetings means as simple things as, do you allow people in the meeting room just unauthorized or even without any control? These are key considerations you need to really have as well. Okay, and most importantly, I think in order for people to work, so working out office or working from home actually makes a bit of people looking at shortcut. And this shortcut, in the keyword, we call it shadow IT. That means you start to look at means and ways you get access to your information. So sometimes this is where companies need to think about how you can allow that while having the tight control. And example, really endorsing or actually using, providing, I would say, shared storage in the cloud and things like that, which is actually under your authorization and where you can actually have full control as well. So going down the line, typically, the same fundamentals apply. Are you actually controlling the confidentiality of the information? Are you allowing people to access it? So the integrity of the part. And most important, which today I think in the current change world, the thing that you really look at if you come to it, I think things like DCP, business continuity planning, really comes into play in terms of, are you sure the team is able to access the data wherever they need to? So I think that is really a key consideration as well. And that's where your threats really will actually hit you when, besides I would say the key concern is really not even able to access your data and not losing it as well. So when we talk about that, what we tend to see is that there's still common mistakes, and these common mistakes are things that needs to be reviewed, things that need to be re-educated, and things that needs to be reaffirmed, especially to the people or your technology. That means if you look about for people, I think the whole security awareness, things like looking at passwords, policies, looking at Wi-Fi use, looking at even segregating device use for home and office becomes clear. And of course, to really have clear processes in terms of allowing access, I would say you have to start to control access to your key documents and really looking at the roles, especially I think if you talk about people with the finance, the HR, these are really key roles that you need to firstly enable them, but of course be able to make sure that the controls are in place in case they get compromised as well. And of course, technology-wise, to review all your configurations. So typical things like even password expiries becomes key. But of course, you still need to make sure that you can actually allow people to do the necessary changes while they properly being authenticated. And then most common other things which we see and really the big cause of the recent is in terms of recurring meetings, try not to use links if you can. This is more of an ignorant, but to actually set meetings so that it actually is unique for every meeting session you have, so that you can actually control who accesses the meeting when they come into it as well. So that's it. Is there anything that has changed out of this? No, the risks and threats actually did not change, but actually what I would put it is it intensifies. It intensifies because we have increased our use of digital means, be it email, and as well as the web. And of course, the other key thing that comes in very strongly is remote access becomes a key part. And remote access means you basically start to have sites connected to what you considered secure locations more often and so on. So when you look at that, I think the employee in terms of negligence actually becomes key. That's actually top right. Scams become common. The common threats in terms of malware and phishing are still actually the key issues. Of course, the other key part is how do you actually look at the definition between home as well as the work network as well. How do you actually strengthen that over time as well? So one of the key things to really focus on is social engineering in terms of what the employees will actually face. So sometimes this becoming awareness that needs to be really educated to the people. How this can be educated, if one to say is, one way is actually a constant reminder. A typical example could be if you start to look at emails from internal and external. You could actually set a reminder for any external email for someone, having a note on top to really remind them to take a look at where the source of the email and reminder not to click on. So while these are addition things to to the email, but it actually helps to remind people from time to time so that they do not make the mistakes just because they are actually trying to rush through things as well. And really have a clear segregation what is internal emails where it's easier for you with your mechanisms or with the platform mechanisms to ensure they're safe, and emails coming from external parties as well. So when we talk about that, quite commonly, I think these are key questions that over time, it needs to be something that we really inbuilt into awareness for people. I think as you talk about any calls today, do you know who is the other person? Are you able to get things like contact details? Are you even be aware of what are the type of information they ask for? So all this you need to be inbuilt into your mind. Are these things critical or sensitive? And of course, the most common things is when requests come in very urgent. And of course, if there is other distraction in the background and so on, not only on your side, but sometimes in even on the other party side. And most commonly is do not actually click. So a lot of these scams actually come through in terms of ways where they're coming in from a very support perspective. So you want to put it in, for where I am, Trustway and Singtel. I mean, Singtel actually gets probably the most scam calls going out to people as well, because that's where they try to actually impersonate Singtel. And these are things, when we look at it, it's really things to really keep in mind. So that, example, if you talk about things like recorded call, giving a message to call back, SMSs to request you on click on links, these are things you really need to watch out and think twice before you actually do something about it. So, of course, I think work from home doesn't make it any easier, especially if you are also yourself distracted, right? So one key things to keep in mind, I think when it comes to scams, of course, when it comes from a perspective of certain rewards and things like that, it's always too good to be true. A lot of times that will be things like when they offer you something that, oh, you're probably getting a sort of price or things like that for just providing certain details and so on. Okay, and do keep in mind, I think your own personal information is the most important. In fact, one of the things I would probably even talk about advocating, unfortunately, that also means that you may lose out on birthday wishes. Do not even publish your birthday, I think, even on social media, because that is really one of the key credentials sometimes used in a lot of ways to authenticate as well. Okay. Do not feel pressured, always stay calm. Always, if you're uncertain, do not need to give a reply. Example, I think if you talk about those scams where they are probably using position of authority like police or this, that's something you need to really watch out for as well. Okay, really moving quickly into the key slide. So one thing, we talk about good practices. When we look at that, first thing, okay, yeah, increase awareness. So that is really start to increase your reminders. That could be in terms of enabling appendance of, I think, messages to the email to make sure that they know that when things are actually coming from external emails. Okay. Really know your platforms. One key recommendation is start to look at segregation based on purpose. So, example, you need to, on a personal level, between work and social. And even on platforms today, in fact, one of the key topics we talk about is define what you use for collaboration internally and what you potentially use for communication or events. We could actually look at different platforms as well. Because privacy, security settings, and start to have that whole house rules in terms of virtual meetings, and that can be done similarly to physical meetings, right? And most fundamental, still have to secure your devices. So ensuring all your mechanisms, your policies, ensure up-to-date OS, applications, and antivirus. Password becomes a key part. If there is multi-factor authentication, be it, I think, OTPs and so on, do enable them, especially for your critical applications or access as well. And of course, securing the whole workplace from office to remote home. In a lot of cases, actually, the best way is not to actually limit remote access unless necessary. So really, if you can look at ways. So today, if you talk about example like platforms like O365, there are ways you can actually collaborate without actually getting remote access back into the company network. So this actually limits a lot of the risk. Of course, the home office itself, the home network needs to be strengthened as well. So things like your own wireless networks, all this needs to be reviewed as well. So this could be something from even a guideline given out to employees to really set their own wireless setup to certain standards in terms of that. So that said, really coming into one key topic that pop up and through discussion these days. So virtual platforms, I mean, which one to use? I normally will actually answer that to the same thing if today you ask me which cloud to use. If you come from a security perspective, nothing is really 100%. You really need to decide and use it according to the purpose of your usage and the type of data that you want to have. And of course, most importantly, I would say is view it in terms of the customer experience or user experience you want to have, right? So what you see here is probably some key things. Are you able to even properly manage if you take on this virtual platform, any of this? Are you able to administer the people that access it and so on? Of course, also educate the users. If you need to, I mean, make sure the the type of settings are turned on by default and so on, in terms of taking things like waiting rooms and so on. Do a worst case risk assessment in a way, look at what we potentially might lose. We'll talk about that. Sorry. And be mindful of, in terms of using free products. Today, I think when we talk about that, there's always advertisements, there's always data that may be collected. So be mindful about the data that you are actually being, if you use a free platform as well. And understand, I think, what the platform, earlier statement in terms of segregating. So you really need to make sure between segregating collaboration, checking on the vendors. Point 7 probably is also the key point where I think today when we talk about any platform, the more it's used, the highly it will actually attract hackers. Of course, if the company is actually putting in place the right, and you yourself are actually observing the recommended settings, that should be fine as well. Reviewing your own data protection policies. This is fundamentally looking at this point, data loss policies are actually very important. And number 9 is probably the the hardest to actually address, because you need to constantly be able to monitor, do constant checks. I think if you start to see, or probably put in place alarms based on the platform you have, so if people are actually, I would say, run foul of the controls that accessing it at different times and so on. So these are probably measures that you look at when you talk about using virtual platforms. Okay. So just a quick recap. I think fundamentally, if we talk about that, is really, first you need to still fundamentally know your risks and threats. You need to look at how you can secure both your platforms and users especially in terms of awareness. This is a key time to stay updated. There's actually a lot of advisories and resources you can look at as well in terms of taking considerations between security and compliance. And of course, the last part, which is actually the most importantly, to maintain that whole effective platform, includes internally, how do you maintain that communication? And also to ensure, you want to say, to have that same connection you have while you're working from office as well. Try and maintain that even on a weekly basis, between teams, within teams, try to actually enforce that. Because today, that's even harder when we talk about work from home scenario. In fact, I would say if you can, I mean, organize things like virtual drinks. I think you see a lot of that in the social media, and that's probably one of the ways to get people closer while we are actually physically distanced as well. So just some quick references that you can take a look at. So without, any loss of time, because I think I really quite stretched the time to pass the original allocated time to look at questions as well. Okay.
Thank you, Johnny. Okay, so without further ado, we're going into the Q&A session. So I think we have a few questions over here. So probably just kickstart with the first question first. Over here, there's something called, does Singapore government have a guideline for teleconferencing requirements? Is there a specific product list that is acceptable or not acceptable? Configurations required when using any conferencing tool? So I think this is also some questions I have, because initially MOE said Zoom cannot be used, then suddenly they say, oh, Zoom is okay to use again. So your thoughts on the question as well as the whole Zoom scenario?
Yeah, so I think the thing points out my earlier topic, right? I think end of the day, if you say from a Singapore government perspective, there are certain guidelines. I think GovTech did actually highlight certain things in terms of even the etiquette in terms of example, when you use a platform, are you doing recording? How do you actually handle the recording after that? Do you dispose of it? So these are things, if you take a step back, it follows through the same way as how you handle personal data and so on. Because if you look at anything recorded as such, is actually, if you say video recording or even voice recording, there is actually a personal element to it as well. In terms of product list today, we do actually did a bit of analysis. I won't share, I can't share it in this. We can see whether we can actually share our point of view. There is nothing about acceptable or not acceptable. It's really what do you want to use it for. So if you are going to use it for collaboration, the recommendation is to not use it for things that's more external, like running your events or just for personal video calls. Do actually do some segregation. Configurations typically, as I mentioned, if you're holding a company meeting, the same mindset, right? You need to know who comes into the meeting. So one way to control example, most likely is actually the waiting room. And of course, if it is something to be really discussed and you need to know who is it there, do mandate, the video on type of mentality. This also adds on to cut away the boundary that I think when we no longer are physically in touch, but yes, with the visuals, it actually still helps to get the same communication across, because you are able to see people's features, you are able to have better understanding, and actually be able to communicate better, I think, with the visual portion.
Okay, so thanks for answering that question. I think it's pretty well answered. We move on to the next one. There was actually a comment made from the audience. He said that many government agencies and large companies do not actually allow their employees to use emails to communicate with customers due to security concerns. This is an obstacle to telecommuting. So I may have not catch this properly, but your thoughts on this comment, Johnny?
I think this is, I think if you talk about government, there is actually a segregation between what is the work email and personal email. And there's actually certain, I would say, what you call the internet separation that they have. So that's probably where, from a perspective that they have, is there is actually no need for them to use the email to communicate beyond their organization. It should be done separately. But so in that context, you want to say, is it an obstacle? Firstly, I think when we talk about telecommuting, there was actually a whole perspective that the company has to evaluate whether that can be done, safeguarding their security concerns. So if you want to say between that, I think the security concerns play a key part as well first, before they can actually allow the telecommuting to be. So this actually applies to, I think, today what we define as essential services, right? some of these really the physical security part is actually very important. So things do not get go beyond to the internet, then unfortunately that needs to be accepted as it is until there's a better way to work around this. Probably looking at even forming certain, I would say in some cases, especially for government agencies, there are also the different networks that actually cater for this as well. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that again. So shall we move on to the next question? Okay, so I think we talked a lot about the social engineering, right? So I think one of my key concerns also is because I think internally, right, especially when we try to, especially this period of time whereby we are forced to work from home, right? So I think a lot of the IT administrators may actually turn on a lot of those self-service, change password, and all those things. So that becomes something that will generate so-called system-generated templates. And if some of the users are maybe seeing it for the first time or whatever, right? Then will that actually prompt to have an issue actually?
Yeah. So I think this is also depending how the mechanism of the password change or password reset is actually set up. A lot of times, if I look at it, the way we need to also ensure, I think, if we talk about your current change password mechanisms, you need to have security question sets being set. If not, you do not allow that, and then it has to go back to the administrator to do so, so that we don't just allow self-help. And of course, on the user side, I think it is really, yes, it looks too real, but sometimes take a harder look in terms of, I would say even the address header. Sometimes try to spot whether there's additional dots or try to make sure that it comes from the right source as well. But I think the key prevention is actually the whole mechanism. So in some cases, maybe even for change password, you need to log back via VPN. So there's at least another set of authentication authorization before you actually get to change your password as well. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Johnny. Thanks. Yeah. So I think yeah, this is something that is actually I think at the top of my mind as well, especially for the SMEs basically. So okay, I think we have two more questions. Whether we take it up and then we'll round up today's session. So the fourth question that we have today is why do some organizations insist only their devices can be used and not personally owned devices? Coming from another point, right? I think because of the circuit breaker. It was given at a short notice, right? I think a lot of companies were scrambling for laptops, and there was a time whereby certain laptop models are not available in the market. So I think everybody was just crunched. Hey, my companies are using a lot of desktop, then suddenly have to get laptops to support work from home arrangement. So how do you see companies responding to BYOD, and then moving forward, how can they negotiate this if the work from home is going to be extended or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think this really depends on how the current technology that they have or how is it set up. So a lot of times, I think the fundamental question is, can they control what data has been accessed? So I think for the main reason why some companies do not allow, I would say personally owned devices is because they do not have the mechanisms to actually I would say harden. So example, you said company laptops, typically the best practice is you will remove all administrator rights. You will even restrict the USB drives. You will have DLP be installed, right? So all these tight controls, if the personal own machines can also have the same level of enforcement, maybe that could be done. Of course, those can look into other means whereby I think still allow certain access, especially I think today we talk about mobile phones and tablets. There is a level of access whereby you could probably view certain information, but not all. And so I would say if you said the question is why, okay, why I think is really a main concern is data loss. And of course, the main reason is of course because they do not see there's an effective way of actually doing controls. I do have I think you want to say certain companies actually will switch into what we call full virtual desktop implementation. That means nothing really sits on the devices itself. So effectively, you can use the device. Of course, the main compromise could be if you take a photo of the screen. But other than that, at least whatever happens or you interact is purely based, nothing is retained on the devices. So this could be methods. But end of the day, the only reason is because they are actually, I would say, afraid of the data loss that could actually arise and the control that they don't have over personal owned devices as well. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so let's come to the last question. I think it's a fitting question. Thank Andre for asking this question. So since we are all working from home, right? What kind of home security do you recommend that we keep? I think yeah, over to you first. Yeah.
Okay, I think if you want to say at least enable the, you want to say you can, okay, I can't remember what's the wireless security standards, but making sure that you enable the higher ones within the routers. The other key part, of course, if today, I think for some of us, we use smart devices, IoT devices, example, like IP cameras. If you can, you actually need to start to look at segregating the network. That means whatever you have that is contained, like IoT devices, entertainment, like your wireless speakers and so on, put them on a separate network and create just one network for your work alone. That means basically a wireless SSID as well. Yeah. And other than that, of course, most importantly is the machine you wish to use for work should be ideally separated from personal use as much as possible. So, of course, if the company gives you a corporate laptop, then just use it. Then any other things, you could connect it to a separate SSID for your home entertainment and things like that. So effectively, you create your own homework network if that's the case. I think segregation is still the best recommendation as well.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you for your time. Today is, I think it's 30 minutes, but I think we stretch into 45 because I think the content that we cover is really a lot today. I'll thank, just like thank your time for actually preparing such a detailed content for us. Just a gentle note to the participants today, the presentation deck will be shared with you guys. So, but I think we'll just need to, Johnny's side will actually just need to prepare some of the content first. So once it's ready, we'll disseminate to everyone. So
yeah.
On this note, I think we'll end today's session. But just before we do actually have a survey form, which we actually seek your help to just help us to complete. You can find the link to the survey form at the chat feature there. So do provide us some feedback on what you think about today's session, and if you to do more together with AiSP, right? What are some of the topics that you would like to know more actually? So also just a short call out. We are having a e-commerce webinar session with Shopee tomorrow. So if you're interested and if you have not signed up, right? Do feel free to click on the registration link found in the chat just to do a quick sign up. So I think we have come to the end of the session. So we just hope that everybody can still continue to stay safe and healthy. So then, yep. Over to you, Johnny. Any last words for our SMEs and the participants?
Yeah, I think it's the same. At this point, probably take the best out of your time that you can working at home. Stay connected. And of course, if you can, I think exercise is still a good thing, either in the home or actually taking that short walk. I do actually recommend getting some fresh air out at times. Really helps.
Okay, so let's just all stay safe, stay cyber safe, and stay healthy.
Yes.
Okay, look forward to seeing you guys. Goodbye. Signing off.